Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain, a podcast where we share effective tips and practices for working with adult ADD, ADHD in a natural, effective way without the use of medications. Each episode, join me, your host, Bahman Sarram, along with the author of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, Michael Joseph Ferguson. Join Michael and myself in an interactive discussion of sharing our stories as we journey together in transforming what can be the gift of being what we call hunter types. This podcast is intended to be your audio companion to the book written by Michael, who joins me each episode where we both will strive to foster dialogue, give you our personal insights, and share both of our experiences on this similar path that we are all on. Our intention and hope is that along with the book, this podcast gives you an additional perspective as you listen to us delve deeper into each chapter of the book to give you even more tools to go along with what it is that you are reading. Visit us at drummerandthegreatmountain.com to purchase the book and look for more tools, tips, and updates, as well as giving us feedback on this podcast. Join our growing global community of creative types, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers on our shared journey. Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast. Welcome to podcast number 22 of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, an audio guide to the Guidebook to Transforming Adult ADD, ADHD by Michael Joseph Ferguson. And welcome once again, my friends, people in the hunter type community, those who have been listening to us from podcast number 1, those of you maybe just joining us along the way. Doesn't matter when you joined us. The fact that you're here is fantastic. We know the community is growing via this podcast, and we're grateful for it. And have a short and sweet podcast for you today. We want to keep it kind of on the shorter side of what we normally do, only because it is holiday time. And last week we started a theme, if you will, of working your way through the holidays as a hunter type, and it was a really, really fun and great podcast to do with Michael. And today we wanted to kind of keep that spirit going, but just kind of keep it short in the sense of we're all busy. We're not going to change the fact that the holiday time is just a crazy time. It doesn't matter what you celebrate. We know it's family times, it's vacations, there's stressors. And so today we want to talk about prepping for the new year. You know, this podcast has always been about encouraging self-reflection. And as we approach the new year, using that theme of quote unquote New Year's resolution, we wanted to kind of do it in a hunter type community way via this podcast. If you recall, for those of you who've been along with us for the ride or have now at this point caught up on the chapters of the book, which we talk about via the podcast, the whole process is a foundation amongst many foundations in this transformational process has been about self-reflection. If you go back to the chapter and podcast we covered on your spirituality and the journey of that, meditation was a big point that we made, and it's made in the book and we made in the podcast. Amongst its other benefits, what was one of the main things that the goal of meditation is? It's about self-reflection, not about self-judgment, mind you, about self-reflection, the acceptance of your wiring. And that's how we've always termed it on this podcast. The wiring of being a hunter type, the courage and self-realization of the benefits of being our wiring, and the transformational process is the things we'd like to improve because of the way we've wired. So we've always been about that. So let's use this new year to really, really kick it through. So when the new year starts and the vacations are over and we're all back to work and our families are gone, we really kick off the new year right. And that's what today's podcast is about. Remember something we've always talked about, that you contribute most to the world by finding and pursuing your bliss and talents. The world needs you. If you remember back to the chapters on working on your life visioning, a lot of us hunter types, and this is what Michael talks about a lot, tend to be, there's always exceptions, but we do tend to be in the community, free spirits, artists, musicians, creative spirits overall. Exactly like Michael and myself. We're musicians at our heart. We're artists. Michael paints. I attempt to paint stick figures. It happens sometimes. The idea of the transformed hunter type is to set yourself up to pursue what you are at your core. The foundation of your artistic, creative spirit needs to be released as to what you do in contributing to the world. So give your permission to focus on what you love. If you don't identify yourself as an artist or a creative type, it just means you haven't spent enough time uncovering it. Through dialing in a healthy routine, you'll have the energy and the inspiration to do so. So, today's podcast, in summary, inspiration for kicking off the new year right, living off a theme of not just existing, not just waking up and being, but existing and living vibrantly, being alive. Aliveness has power to create wondrous things in the world. So think of today as what you want to walk away from this podcast is, in this next year, 2016, how can I feel more alive? And with that in mind, we'll bring along, as I always do, my very good friend, my dear friend, Michael. Good morning to you as always.
Good morning.
What keeps, so we're talking about this. We know what the goal is to walk away from what we're trying to do today. But can you just give us your reflection, your research in your own life? What is it that keeps hunter types from achieving all we can? It almost seems, we've talked about this before, but a lot of hunter types are known to their friends and family as almost as being underachievers, but there's a reason for that. So get us into that so we know then how to pull out of that.
Yeah, well, I'd say the first piece is to also note that some of the most successful, celebrated people in history are hunter types. So this tendency towards mastering and in focusing on something, that hyper focus, is what has made so many of the great artists, great athletes. So it's important to identify ourselves with those people, and not just if you have found yourself in a place where you've been a square peg in a round hole, like where you're expected to do things or expected to live a life that's really not for your wiring. So I think that's really important to recognize, that just going into it, is that the capacity for people wired the way we're wired is tremendous. What you can achieve, what you can do with your life. So oftentimes I'd say that the biggest challenges are, one, if you haven't been focusing on your health in terms of exercise and diet and what you're putting into your body, has a huge, huge impact on your energy level, your ability to focus, and your ability to build up that momentum in your life to make the changes you want to make. It's like building up escape velocity. You need to be able to get enough energy and focus towards what you want to be doing to move yourself out of a place. So if you're listening to this podcast, chances are there's some frustration in your life. Otherwise, you would be a hunter type that would just be out in the world doing what you want to be doing, and everything's fine. And there's lots of people that are like that are wired exactly the same way you are and have the same challenges, but they've been able to adapt and either consciously or unconsciously deal with them. But if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you've gotten to a place where you're frustrated, you're having challenges with focus, and you're in relationships and work and things like that. So part of it is, if you're in that space, one is to realize that you can shift it, and that part of that starts with health. It always starts with health and wellness, A. And then B is also looking at some of your limiting belief systems that have been placed upon you by other people that aren't wired the way you're wired. And so specifically, what are you supposed to be doing with your life? How are you supposed to be? What kind of routines are you supposed to have? How are you supposed to be showing up for people? These are things that need to be, especially going into the new year, examined and perhaps shifted. And I want to start with that label of having how we are wired as being a disorder. This is something we go over and over and again. It's not a disorder. You're a neurological type. This is how we're wired, and you have the capacity for greatness inside you, provided you take care of your health and you start to cultivate those places in your life that are uniquely you, that can then be used as gifts to others. I mean, that's how what it boils down to is, if you're an artist, you're an athlete, if you're a entrepreneur, it's at the end of the day, you're being of service through your gifts for other people. That's how you make money. That's the key to wealth. And so these are the things that, going into the new year, if you place these in the forefront, focusing on your health and wellness and focusing on your gifts and what you want to be doing with your life, you're going to see major changes in a short period of time.
You know, the one thing I wanted to point out, because we had some funny moments on the podcast last week, just imagining some family times where I think I brought up hanging out with cousin X, who you could never stand anyways.
Right.
And you're just forced to in this holiday situation. One thing you mentioned that I definitely have experienced this personally, but I had to express it, which is, I found it really funny what you said about those that are not of this type judging you and making you feel certain ways and certain things. The funny part that I've noticed about that is that those who are not of this wiring, who are telling you how you should live your life or how you should be, yada, 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 it doesn't mean that they have their act together either. That's the other thing to keep in mind. We're all human. Sorry for the cliche, but I can't think of any other word. That's the other thing to be careful about too. So if you're on the beginning of this journey, right? I feel like there's 7 steps to anything. I feel like part of the hunter type journey is one of those first steps, besides realizing that this is how you're wired, this is who you are. Oh, this is how I am. I'm going to look into how to transform it and be the best I can with it. Part of it also is realizing what things haven't worked up to now. And one of those things that didn't work for me, that I threw away, was putting so much weight when people that are not of this wiring, what they say, and the way I would make myself kind of detach from that so that I wouldn't feel any angst from it is, I'm sorry, it doesn't seem like things are that great for you either. And I've noticed some shortcomings you have in your own life. You're in a job that you're not all that happy about, but you're telling me I should stay with the day job that I'm miserable with. So, just, I guess, long story short, I blabber as always, is take everything with a grain of salt. It's about you. Remember, this is about you. It's not about anyone else. And now that you're here and listening to the podcast and you've got this book, those things really shouldn't matter. They just should.
That's it. That's perfectly put. And pick out those role models for you. And I don't care how old you are. You've got to have people that you can emulate, that call you that you can relate with, that you sense that you are wired similarly to them. To emulate. I mean, so that it's important for you to have good role models that you feel like you can relate with, versus if you find yourself going into this new year and the majority of our life is based on obligation. And, when you have a family, you have to provide for your family, and all those are extremely important. And some of the best gifts that you can give to your family and your kids, if that's you, is taking time to pursue those things that you love, because you'll get excited, you'll feel good about it, you're going to be happier, they'll be happier, and it's this thing. So if you want to give a better life for your family, part of that means that you pursue those things that you most care about, because you want that for your children. I would guess you don't want to just pass on obligation to the next generation, because you don't have to. And so I'll give you a perspective. I was thinking about this week, that when I was So I've made my living for the most, so the last maybe 8 or 9 years I've been doing coaching, but primarily I've made my living as an artist, doing starting out in 3D animation, and then went on to doing graphic design, and now web development and media development and music production. All those things actually came out of learning how to use a computer when I was like 10. I think I got my first computer at 10. And it kind of just occurred to me because I was looking for a new computer, and I thought, I make my entire living since like 19, 20 years old on something that costs like $500-$600. Like that was the investment, self-taught all the way through the line, and watch so many people who've made shifts in their life, even at like 40 or 50 years old, with like a computer, and that's it. And whatever you're doing, I mean, just the basic tools necessary to learn what you need to learn. And when you understand that you can make money in multiple ways. So I always harp on this. Like, if you can make money outside of a 9-to-5 job, it creates a certain level of self-confidence. Even if you stay with it, even if like, yeah, I have a family, I've got to do that, at least you have the ability that you can do other things. That's extremely powerful. And so I just want to encourage you going into the new year to start thinking about, how can I open up, if this is an issue for you, how can I open up other means of earning a living, doing what I love, even if it's just a fraction of what you need to make right now. At least have, like, so if you're going to pursue something that is work related, or pursuing something that's your passion, early on start to think about, how do I make a living doing this if I wanted to? And just that thought, and it doesn't have to taint the experience of it. It can be helpful, and then starting to move, because you need that in order to start shifting your life towards those things that you really want. They do need to provide you back enough income so that you can continue doing. Not always. I mean, you can have your side music gig, and that's going to be perfect. But for many of you, it's important to maybe think a little bit further down the line if you want to have a life where you're doing more of the things that you want to be doing. And a big part of that's going to be the finances.
But I think also, as hunter types, we tend to not operate that well, or be used to operating in gray. We tend to operate in black and white. It's part of our wiring.
Right.
It's part of our wiring to sprint and be really good at something short focused, but not be, when we're untransformed, be good in the long run. With that in mind, in relation to what you said, that's why there's nothing wrong with something I've learned over the last couple of years. So you told a little bit of your story. Long story short, for me, I went into the workforce right out of college. Did that for a few years, 6-figure salary job, dropped it at 30 years old to sign with a record label and be a full-time musician, because my theory was no regrets in life. But that was very hunter type of me. I dropped one thing fully and went fully into another. Yeah. No regrets. It was great. That didn't last. Then I went and worked for myself back in the computer industry, having my own business for 7 years. That kind of ran its course. I'm now currently back at a desk job, a corporate job, and I'm grateful because it's providing for the family that I always dreamed of having. So there's nothing wrong with that. But what I have found, just like you, is in addition to the day job, I'm working on 3 other things that keep me in the music world, keep my foot in the music world, with an intention, an eventual intention of it being what I do full time. So I guess my lesson there is, if you are, just topping what Michael said, if you are in a 9-to-5 job right now, that's okay. What we are saying for the new year is, imagine yourself, give yourself that feeling of imagining what it is you're going to do in the new year, if you haven't already, to do what you love on the side, at least to start. Then as you go through this process, you will find a way to eventually do things, multiple things that you love, and then maybe you'll be able to drop the 9-to-5 job. But if what you do right now is a 9-to-5, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's never anything wrong. The only thing you have to be careful of is making sure that you have your foot in something else that'll eventually get you there.
That's it. And very, very well put. And then in terms of your current job, there's maybe modifications that you can make. Maybe there's a lateral or an up move you can make within your job that would shift how you do things. So if you're doing a very mundane daily task job, it's not going to be the best for you as a hunter type, guaranteed. You're not being, and you're not optimizing your problem solving abilities, your just the skill set that tends to come with being hunter types, creativity, those pieces. And if you haven't explored that, if you feel kind of just deadened and you feel like, oh, I'm not very creative, and I talk to some clients that are like that, it's part of that is just your health. You've got to just, I can tell you firsthand, my whole life changed when I started focusing and taking responsibility for my health, and it's never too late to do it. And so going into next year, then starting with, if you've got the book, go to the life visioning chapter and start going through the exercises. So I would encourage you to look at the main areas, life arenas that are listed in the book that I borrowed from Sonia Choquette's, I always forget the name of her book. I'll come back to it. I always forget the name. So those are health and body, work, relationships, creative expression, finances, service, spirituality, home, travel and adventure, and possessions. So taking each one of those categories and even just bulleting out, here's what the perfect, like, here's my goals, but more importantly, here's what it looks like to have those goals met. What does it look like? What's the vision for health and body? What do you feel like? I am now, like, start each one of these with, I am now ... I am now 160 pounds and feeling vibrant and healthy. I am now exercising 3 times a week and I'm loving it. Whatever it is, start each one of those, go through each one of those categories and just start, picking this off. Take a little time off. If you're feeling overwhelmed by all of your current life right now, try to sneak away and even just start working on that exercise. Start a journal or start a file on your computer. Again, all this is very spelled out in the life visioning chapter if you have the book. And then creating a compelling vision for each of those. And then even if you just start with a couple goals, that's great. Some of you may just write voluminously on each one of these, which is great. But then you got to start. Then the next step is paring it down to digestible pieces so you can really start working on it. And
one note,
yes.
if I could, because it just struck me. Remember, for those of you who've been along for the ride, even before maybe you got into reading this book and working on yourself, the new year also is a chance. I know it is for me. So full transparency, there are some things I just need to go back and revisit and tweak and because I've a little bit fallen off on those categories. So what we're talking about in the new year is not just for those of you that are new and want to do this for the first time. For those of you who've been along for the ride, take the new year and see in these categories, such as the main life visioning areas, go back and visit and just be honest with yourself and say, I'm not doing bad, but where is it that maybe I could do some improvement? Or maybe if you're honest with yourself, you see you dropped off on some things. Not all the way. You haven't gone back to 0, but right. Maybe you were at a 9 and you went to a 5. How do you bring it back up to an 8 or a 9?
That's it. Well put. And so going into what is the, you just mentioned it a while back. So the bane of us hunter types, and it's wired into us. It's part of the drive towards mastering something, that hyper focus, whatever that looks like to you, is repatterning this thing where if you don't do something perfect, then you're like, screw it, I'm just not going to do it, and then you just go, fuck it, I'm just done. I'm going to move on. And so this tendency, I can tell you, is universal with every single person I've ever worked with. And everyone has it to a degree, but hunter types have it through the roof. So repatterning this piece inside you that goes, okay, I slipped up, therefore I'm just giving up and I'm going to go back because I only want it to be perfect or it's nothing at all. And so again, this tendency is healthy in the sense that if you're focusing on mastering a skill, that can help you stay with it and perfect. But then if you get to that place where I just got to give up, then obviously when you're talking about health and wellness and all these other things, like it's deadly. So how part of the healing of this tendency is to start moving towards, okay, you start. So let's give an example. You start the year off and you're like, okay, that's it. I'm going to be running like 5 times a week. And, hunter types tend to do this. Not all of us, but many of us. And we're go overboard. We're like, we're going to just
Yep.
I'm going to do 5 times a week.
Yep.
And then I'm going to have like an entrepreneurial group I'm going to, 2 times a week. And da 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 da. And then what happens is one doesn't happen, or you burn out, and then it's like, forget it, and then you just go back to your old patterns again. And
I'm laughing, by the way. I am laughing at myself
Yeah.
and many hunter type friends I have, because this pattern you describe is just so funny to me, that this is literally what we do, and it's the beauty of it, right? It's what do we? It's good. It's healthy to laugh at yourself sometimes. So
Yeah.
when you were describing that, I was thinking of when I first wanted to work for myself in my own business. When I came back off the road as a musician, I was like, oh, well, to have your own business means X. I put it in this category, and I was very hunter type about it. And I found myself by the second week of trying to have my own business that I had literally joined every business group there was in San Diego. And I wasn't actually going out and looking for clients. I was like part of 6 groups. And it finally took one of them, who had seen my name on another list, said, you really only need to join the one that's like closest to your area. You don't need to come to the one that's 20 miles away. So that's why I'm laughing. I mean, it's the beauty of being us. It really is.
That's right. And it's just keeping it in check is the thing, because like that same tendency can make you very rich. I mean, and has made people very rich.
Right.
So like, it's not. You have to laugh at it, and then you have to just kind of. And I have to do daily kind of adjust to this. But so I think the big thing is, you set those intentions. Just as an aside note, I remember I just had a thought. So I mean, to give you an example of how other people perceive me, especially when I was younger, is I remember telling one of my friends, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm starting to run. Gonna go down to the beach and running." He's like, "I can totally visualize what this is like. I like get up and I just run at full speed for like a quarter of a mile and then just collapse." I was like, yeah, that's it. That's like someone that knows me really well. So I think so how you shift this is you anticipate that there's going to be slip ups. You anticipate that you're going to start the year off with intentions, and then you may get a quarter of them going, and that's fine. Like even 10% of them is fine. And you start to celebrate the wins that you do have, and you start to build on those so that you can see, you can start to pay attention to when you go, oh, okay, I just totally didn't do it this week. Therefore, now I'm just like sitting and watching TV at the end of the day and just zoning out, or I'm self-medicating in ways that don't feel good to me. And only you know what that's like, but you know where I'm coming from on that. So these are the things to watch for going into the new year as you're making intentions for the new year, is to know that you're going to have more on the list than you probably will be able to maintain in any given time. And you're going to have to focus on a few of those. And then you learn to celebrate any wins that you have.
The one thing about anticipating, it's something you said in our notes before, knowing who you are, anticipating this tendency to, this pattern, if you will, of being into something, but then slipping up, going off routine. That's not the negative of being a hunter type. That's almost the thing of being human. But as hunter types, it's what we do when we fall down, which is then go all the way back. And one imagery I wanted to give to our friends out there is this. I did not make this up. I don't know who did, but it was passed on to me, so I want to pass it on. Is pick a category: exercise, eating, whatever. Let's go with food. Let's say you're put in a situation, you've been doing really well with your diet, and it's a company party. It's a family party. You didn't plan that day. You didn't plan your snacks out right, and you overindulged. Okay, so you overindulged. The untransformed hunter type, such as myself, for years did this. That became a pattern of, well, I overindulged there in that one meal. So now it's nighttime. Whatever. I screwed up today. I might as well screw up for dinner. Then the next morning, the next thing you know, literally 3 weeks has gone by, and now you've been eating like crap for 3 weeks. That's the untransformed hunter type. The transformed hunter type, the one who's working on things constantly, sees that one meal, and this is the imagery that I didn't make up, it was passed on to me. Literally picture yourself as a boxer, and that you just got hit, you went down, but the referee counted to 8. And when you got up, and then you took over that boxing match again. It's only an 8 count. Until you are knocked out, you can stand up again. And I'm telling you, this really worked for me a lot. I would slip up on something, but I would literally close my eyes and picture, okay, acceptance of what is. I just got knocked to the ground, but I got up at 8. I got up before the 10 count. It wasn't a TKO. Imagine yourself getting back up and getting back into that ring and taking over. And it'll happen again. I'm going to keep using this imagery. Then you might go down for 7. I actually started to use this as a system. I was like, well, I slipped up, but you know what? Actually, it wasn't that bad of a meal. It wasn't ideal. I think that was a 5 count. I started playing games with myself.
Nice.
Because the important part was metaphysically letting myself know that I'm back up. So I just wanted to share that.
That's brilliant, and that's exactly it. And that's a muscle. That's a muscle that I can tell you gets built over time, and it then starts to then move into. Often, when you focus on health first, those same muscles that get you to get out and go for exercise, or maybe don't eat this but eat this, that starts to then. There's a direct connection between that muscle and the muscle that goes, okay, I'm going to now call 4 people in relation to a project I'm working on, or I'm going to carve out this time this week for my own work. Like that same muscle of self-discipline moves towards those things that you want to manifest. Those are completely interconnected. So the more you recognize that focusing on your health and wellness directly connects with you having more freedom and more financial abundance, that's powerful, and more like creative satisfaction. All those pieces all connect together, and I can tell you undeniably that those times in my life that I was most focused on my health and wellness have been the most successful times. And I vacillate. There's times where I'm like really, really, really on my health, and sometimes that I'm not as much, and I can see the difference. It's like it's never perfect. You're never going to have it just right. But then you build up enough credit in the bank in terms of your own ability to do this, that even those times when you slip up or you're tired and you take time off or whatever, you're able to get back up a lot quicker.
In fact, regards to that, as we wrap up, we said it'd be short and sweet. An update from those of you that tuned back in last week, because we had been out a while, and if you go back last week's podcast, you know the details of why I was out due to a family emergency. A quick update on that, which is right in line with this particular topic right now that we just were talking about. I was off my routine, eating and exercise for 3 weeks. That's a long time for a hunter type to be out, because that's when we tend to go all the way back to 0. Yeah. It wasn't an 8 count. It was a 9.5 count. The ref almost called the fight. I'm not going to kid you. The ref almost called the fight. But last week, I got up. And this week, I got back into the game, and I got back into my exercise routine. And there was a part of me that was like, man, I don't know. This is the longest I've gone since I started working on things without it didn't matter. The credit that you just said was built up was it made it so easy. It was no struggle now that I was home and not at the hospital, not having to worry about my dad. There was no struggle. The credit had built up and was like, it's Monday. This is when you would normally go to the gym. You don't have to be at the hospital today. You have no food to bring to anyone at the hospital running their shift. What are you going to do? You're going to do what you used to do, what you've been doing for a year now, 3 days, sometimes 4 days a week. You're going to go to the gym. So it was only a 9.5 count. So there's a real life example of something I wanted to share.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
In summary, I love what we said in the beginning. I just want to go back to that, Michael. This New Year inspiration that we're working on is it's really, to me, we've mentioned a few things in the pre-opening. It's real. I love the way you put it. It's permission. Give yourself permission in 2016 to focus on what it is you love to do. And to me, that summarizes it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great.
We are a small shop. What this book is, what this project is, help spread the word about Drummer in the Great Mountain. Reviews are really, really helpful, and that goes a few ways. Leave a review on iTunes about the podcast. Leave a review on Goodreads about the book. Those of you that have, thank you. One thing I want to remind people of is Michael is constantly finding posts on people's personal blogs about us and this podcast.
Yeah.
We love that. That's what helps spread the word. That's what helps us, this service, this podcast, what Michael and I get up every Saturday morning to do. We have families, we have lives, and I'm not saying that for patting us in the back. I'm just letting you know this is such an inspiration to us. We love doing it, but the only way we know that it's making a difference, which is one thing that this podcast is giving both you and I. We've talked about this. This is our way of giving back. This is a service. And it really helps when you're giving a service to know that people appreciate it. So get on Facebook. We have those social media links on drummerandthegreatmountain.com, all kinds of ways to engage. Michael reads your emails. Michael reads your tweets. Michael reads your feedback on Facebook. I hear about it all the time through him, what you guys are sharing. Get the word out. Let's build this community even stronger than what it is. And you can also help by getting this info to different institutions. Social workers, progressive psychologists. Michael, you recently had a talk at a local library, I believe.
Local Carlsbad Library here. And we've got some talks planned for this coming year. So, and it's just to reiterate, any connections that you feel would be beneficial for this information, like how we can make contributions in other arenas, especially within. I've given some talks at schools that are now adopting this information, which is really exciting. Please share, and also many of you are very creative. I know some of you are in the creative careers. Please send over any suggestions you have in terms of marketing and getting the word out. Would love to hear it.
And one thing I want to put in there about your feedback is as the host and co-producer of this podcast, what would be helpful to me is start in your feedbacks. I've mentioned this before, but I feel like we're at a time where we can really be open to this. Let Michael know via any of these vehicles of communication if there's a particular topic you want us to focus on, because I feel like, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, if we get enough feedback on something, that's what's going to let us know what kind of expert guest to bring in on that topic.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think we're at a good point in the community with where we are. Let us know. You've kind of gone through the book. You've been through the podcast with us. Now you want to really get into the weeds, into the details of a particular topic. So let us know. Your creativity is going to help fuel the rest of this podcast and what we do with it. So keep that coming. I'm inspired for the new year, my friend. Thank you as always for your time on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, you as well. And I hope everyone has a very beautiful holiday season. I think we're going to try to get in one more podcast here before Christmas. But I hope everyone just stay calm, find your center, and do those things that bring you joy.
Beautiful. Well said. drummerandthegreatmountain.com is where you can find us. As we said, social media links give us feedback. We want to hear your stories. We never share anything personal about your stories, but your stories of inspiration, of where you are, of your challenges, are what fuel the topics for the podcast. So keep those coming. And as always, we say on the Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast, please take care of yourselves and your health. Be well.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is intended solely for the purpose of personal growth and not as a replacement for professional psychological support. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests of this show are not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is very important to seek the help of a qualified medical practitioner when making any shifts to psychiatric medication you may be taking, or if you are experiencing extreme psychological distress.